Welcome back to the Double Loop Podcast, your source for everything related to fingerprints. We're what to listen to while you're working with whirls. I'm Eric Ray.
And I'm Glenn Langenberg.
Yes, the first thing to say is that we're actually in the same room together.
I'm in Arizona.
Welcome to the heat. It's October, but it's still 100 degrees outside. We're in the middle of a great week of your advanced ASV class. So Thanks again for coming back out to the Valley of the Sun.
It's not a graded class. You don't have to kiss up. But that's nice of you to say. It's really warm here. That's what I can say. It's warm and dusty. Lots of dust.
That is what we have a lot of, warmth and dust. So, good class so far?
Yeah, it's actually, like most of these classes, it's fun to have examiners from many different agencies get together and talk about advanced concepts, particularly policy and decision making, how they approach this, how they approach different decisions. I love that, and I've been teaching this class for 7 years now, and I never get bored. It's always interesting. It's always different. I mean, some of the things I see over and over, but there's always little different nuances and there's a little different spin to it, and I enjoy that part of it.
Well, great. Any other new news from back home in the Great White North?
No, I don't think anything's new since I've been here most of the time this week. So,
any other new news then?
Just a couple of things that happened last week. Two things. One, there was some documents for review on SWGFAST's website. The period for comment has closed. That was going through September 30th. But I suspect if you got your results in right now with the government shut down, you could probably they'll still be there when the government reopens. So you can probably still get your comments in if you wanted to.
We're in that boat. We weren't on the ball and didn't get comments in yet. And I know that SWGFAST won't be able to operate without Arizona DPS comments.
That's true.
We'll make sure to get those in this week.
And the second thing that they talk about, too, is what is the future of SWGFAST? What will happen to SWGFAST? Who will govern SWGFAST? They will not likely be called SWGs anymore. There's a new sheriff in town who's looking to make some big changes, so we can talk about that a little bit, too.
All right, so I guess that can be our topic for the show this week is taking a look at the three documents that are up for review right now, and maybe look at the future of SWGFAST, or whatever it evolves into.
Sure. Okay. Well, the three documents that are available at www.swgfast, that's SWGFAST.org, swgfast.org. If you go to the section for the documents, you just click on the tab Documents, you'll see drafts for comment, and there are three of them there right now. The first one is Guideline for the Articulation of the Decision-Making Process for Individualization and Friction Ridge Examinations. Yeah, exactly.
you lost me halfway through that title.
Right. We refer to it in SWGFAST as the quote-unquote articulation document. Basically, how do you explain an individualization, an ID in court today, in today's court environment?
Well, let's go through, list off all three of them that we have here that we're going to talk about.
The second one is the standard for consultation. And so this is how to have a consultation with another examiner, what needs to be documented, and what process should be used for that consultation.
Okay.
All right. And then the third one is it's a revision on one that had been up already. Standards for examining friction ridge impressions and resulting conclusions, often referred to as the quote-unquote methodology document, because it runs through the ACE-V process or methodology, whichever you prefer, right, and then lays out the steps of ACE-V and the appropriate conclusions from ACE-V.
At our agency, we tend to call that one just the main document.
The main document.
Yes, the main SWGFAST document.
I like that. It is. I actually do think it's one of the most important, critical documents that has come out. That and the standard for documentation, I think, are two of the most important ones.
Right. So like I was saying here with the first one, I remember when that first came out for draft. I think probably last summer is that, if I remember correctly. That was my very first reaction. Was looking through that title and not even really following exactly what it was trying to say. And then in our little discussion at our agency, when we kind of got together and laid out and all this kind of talked out, what does this mean, and what comments can we offer to SWGFAST just from our agency's perspective.
So your first comment is change the frickin' title.
We instead of, like you said, you don't call it the long title. You call it the articulation document. We started referring to it as the document in search of a better name.
Okay.
So,
I can go on that one.
That was my first my first thought on it was okay. Let's think of maybe another way to convey all this, and maybe just a few less words. But that was as I started going into it, and I saw that title and got out my red pen and was thinking to myself, oh boy, okay, here we go. I'm going to see what I have to offer, in comments for this, but I'm probably going to have just loads of comments. And got through the first section and thought, oh, this is pretty good. This is a really good way to articulate this part of what I do, and it's got all the references that I would need to kind of back up what I'm saying or further explain what I'm saying. And thought, okay, that's pretty good. And went through the second one, and in each section I went through, that was kind of my thought was wow, that's actually a really good way to explain what I do. And here's all the references. This is a really full document with tons of information, all in one place. This is great. And then went back, man, it just needs a better name. So it's
that's actually the best compliment and criticism we could ever get. That all it needs is just a better name.
Exactly.
Well, this document's pretty near and dear to me. I was involved in this committee, and it was really a way for us to express an individualization. How could we get examiners in today's court environment to express an identification, give them something other than how we used to testify? I mean, literally, we at SWGFAST talked about, well, we knew that the IAI had sent a memo out saying stop testifying to an individualization to the exclusion of all others, don't use a zero error rate. This memo came out the day after the NAS report. But I actually give that memo and the author of that memo a lot of credit, Bob Garrett at the time, and I think that was a great thing to do. My only criticism is they didn't offer the community something else, and I believe that Bob probably knew down the road we would be able to do that. And I think that's where the genesis of this document really came from. Let's give them that something else, that if we're not supposed to say those things in court now, what can they say? And we really approach this document as what are defensible statements in court, from beginning of the skin, which we believe to be complex, unique, and persistent, all the way down to I'm making an individualization, reporting it in court. And so it sort of walks you through the logic of that decision. And as you said, this was really important to all of us writing it, that we wanted to have references for each of these main points. So every time you said something, one of the main points in the document, you could refer to these articles. And I believe, if not all of them, are on the Holy Grail disc. So they're readily available if you have a copy of the Holy Grail reference library.
If you look at the structure of the document as a whole, it seems like about a third of the whole document is just the list of references at the end, and just this great summary of everything in one place. Going through the main body of the document, I was really struck on how, not dumbed down, but how straightforward and simple each of these concepts were. It was usually one, maybe two sentences that summarized everything that there was to say about this, gave the references in another place so you can go and look up the explanation behind all these concepts. But it was almost like a court answer all summed up with this great way to phrase it all in one place and right there.
Yeah, and that was exactly our intent was to do that. However, I can always step back, and you and I sometimes might be accused of being a bit nerdy and eggheadish. So
what? No, I've never gotten that before.
I would imagine there are people that pick up this document and go, "What the F are they talking about?" I mean, I have no idea. What do you mean it's this? The keep it simple, stupid. This is maybe for some people might look at this and feel quite differently. I actually agree with you. I think that it really distills down into fairly simple language, because it has a statement, but then it follows up with a more detailed description, and then even talks about, and I think fairly plain language, a few issues that we previously used to deal with. I mean, if we break down the basic elements, it says friction ridge skin is unique and complex and persistent. And that when you touch a surface, you leave behind an impression of that skin, and that you can detect features in that impression, basically minutia and level 3 detail and creases and so forth. The features detected are compared against the two impressions, so now we're in the comparison phase, and you determine if there's correspondence. Are they intolerant? And then do you have enough features in tolerance? Are they discriminating enough? If you have correspondence and enough discriminating features, then you can render an identification. And this is a decision to form this opinion and report this decision, and then you must report it in writing or report. So it kind of walks you through that, and then what all of those elements mean. I also like that it does some things like, in the past, fingerprint examiners may have testified this way. We used to say, to the exclusion of all others, or that it has a 0 error rate, and now we say why we don't use that anymore. So someone reading it, if they're asked, well, didn't you used to say this, or why did you change, it actually has some of the basis for, or not basis, but it talks about what we used to say and why we've changed it, and I really like that part a lot.
Absolutely. If there are any members of SWGFAST listening to this podcast right now, and why wouldn't they, first of all?
Because they have better things to do.
No, that's not possible.
Breaking Bad, they need to be watching Breaking Bad.
They would know that historically, Arizona DPS has always had something to say about just about every document that SWGFAST has put out, typically more than a few. And I think this was one of the first times that we went through with literally barely anything to say. Again, coming from our generally critical agency, I think that says a lot.
Well, it does. It passed the Arizona DPS scrutiny. That's nice to hear. We did. We spent a lot of time on this one, and I feel pretty good about this document. And then, of course, it's always vetted by the whole group. And then lots of new comments come in, and there are a lot of things we changed, and so it wasn't just that committee. I mean, it was definitely all of SWGFAST commenting, and then any public comments that come into. I'm pleased with the document. I think it's a nice listing of references, and like you said, a fairly logical step-by-step. How do I walk someone through the scientific nature of an identification decision?
Right.
Yep. Cool. All right.
Let's head to the main document, as I was calling it.
The main one. All right, got it. Now, there's not a lot of changes to that one. That one had already been approved. What's new in that one is the addition of the inconclusive category and breaking that open to express more than simply, I don't know, inconclusive.
SWGFAST has put in that when you are inconclusive, you need to give a reason for that inconclusive. And if I'm remembering right, the previous draft or the previous version of this document basically left it up to the agency to determine the best way to describe that.
Yeah,
there wasn't a whole lot of guidance in what reasons you can give behind the inconclusive.
Well, in fact, I remember discussing this quite a bit. We went through lots of discussion in SWGFAST. I remember certain members of SWGFAST saying, well, in our agency, we open up that box a little bit. We do this, we do that. And I think in the end, we took all that out and then went with, no, you just have to give a reason why, and now it's left to the agency to report that.
Right.
But we revisited, and clearly we've gone back and put that stuff in now.
Right. It seems that there are now 3 reasons given of an option of one way to approach inconclusive, and 3 different reasons that you can give as to why you're inconclusive. It does still maintain that kind of previous mindset where if you as an agency decide to go with a different set of reasons, as long as you document what those are, put that into your policies, then basically SWGFAST is still good with that.
And what are the 3 reasons?
So the 3 reasons would be, first, they say lack of comparable areas, and a new acronym for us all, LCA.
The LCA.
And I think this is just, seems like the standard, I need better knowns, NBK, right. Traditionally, since we're all about acronyms, which makes sense. This is just the standard original inconclusive that's been around forever and kind of everyone agrees is a way to be inconclusive, is you just need better knowns. Here, it goes a little bit further and describes that the area of the latent print does not fully or does not at all match with the area recorded in the exemplar prints, and of course you would need comparable areas to be able to compare.
Right, incomplete knowns.
Right.
Right.
So the second one being lack of sufficiency for individualization, LSI. And here it just describes that there are features that correspond between the latent and the known, but that is not sufficient in some way to individualize.
Actually, you hit on something that I should comment on this. It's not sufficiently discriminating to individualize because the correspondence is sufficient, but it's really about lack of specificity.
Specificity, yes.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
That's been the big buzzword this week in the training class. So
all about specificity.
All about specificity this week.
Yeah.
But then following up with that no substantive dissimilar features are observed. Basically, everything that I see here matches up. I don't see any differences, but it's still not quite enough for an ID. Again, going back to approach 1 versus approach 2, I guess this would be something that approach 2 would use. Approach 1 would still stick with their only using the LCA, the lack of the need better knowns as their inconclusive.
Yeah, right. So those impressions, say in a federal agency, like many of the feds would use in approach 1, you would expect that those impressions would be quote unquote no value or not of value for identification purposes.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. Now, the third scenario, or the third reason for an inconclusive given in this document now, is kind of the opposite. Lack of sufficiency for exclusion, LSE, where dissimilar features are observed, but not enough dissimilarity to exclude, and that no kind of meaningful or substantive, is the word they use, correspondence is observed between these two impressions. And that makes total sense to me, with especially all the work I'm doing, all the talk I'm doing about the exclusion decision. I'm glad that it's kind of reflected here in that it's a total separate determination, a separate mindset, a separate conclusion to reach, isolated from the ID or the searching decision that you make of whether or not you have enough for an exclusion. Now, at our agency, we have a similar setup. We've kind of grouped them together. So we have the first one, no need better knowns, and then we've grouped the second two together to be that the latent print is lacking in some way. But these are exactly what we mean when we say that either there's lack of sufficiency for an ID or there's lack of sufficiency for an exclusion. We just, at this time, haven't broken those two out into two distinctive reasons. We lump them together in that the latent print is lacking sufficiency.
And as I recall, you guys do verify those inconclusives, correct?
Yes.
Right.
Which I think we've promised to talk about, but in maybe another episode, since that might be...
Actually, you know what? When we go to a break and we come back from the break, I will be happy to talk about why in our agency we don't verify those inconclusives. Let's just get that out now before I forget.
Well, stick with us, folks, and when we get back, Glenn and I will go over maybe some of the pros and cons of doing these verifications on inconclusives. So we'll be right back. If you're a regular listener to the Double Loop podcast, you've heard about the new 3-day class on exclusions from Eric Ray and Penny Deckant. Well, we've decided that our new, improved, longer version of this class needed a new name: Exclusionology, Standards in Reducing Errors. If your agency is struggling to adapt to the exclusion decision, consider bringing in this class. We'll start at the beginning and work through every aspect of ACE-V from the exclusion perspective. Get more details about exclusionology on eliteforensicservices.com. All right, welcome back. We are returned from our break and ready.
We have beers.
We do have beers.
Since I'm in Arizona, I have Four Peaks beer and Kilt Lifter, a good Scottish-style ale.
A great name for a beer as well.
Yes, Kilt Lifter.
I just have a Miller Lite because our host here today ran out of Kilt Lifters, which is a far better beer than Miller Lite.
Wow, we're calling out our host. Bad host.
No,
Okay.
no, we have a great host today. All right, so we got to throw down here now on inconclusive verification, or at least just briefly discuss the topic.
Sure. Okay. So in our agency, we, as a result, I think it was of the 2010 CTS test, a number of us in the agency missed the identification. In fact, we reported inconclusive and said we needed better knowns, but on review later it was determined that we probably should have identified it. And there was a lot of concern about that test, and that maybe is another topic, but that led to a review of many of our cases and our approaches to exclusions and our verification process. And that, in combination with some of the research we had done in our lab, had identified that there may have been an issue with us essentially verifying verifications. We verified all IDs, but at the time we didn't verify exclusions or inconclusive. So the first thing we did was we started verifying everything. And we spent a lot of time doing that. And we monitored how much time it took to do that type of verification versus just verify identifications. And after looking at a number of cases, I think we did it for maybe about a year or so, we realized two things. That we felt it was still important to verify the exclusions. We felt that that was something important to do. And so we maintained that. But when it came to the inconclusives, we found that we almost never had a different opinion. Essentially, it never changed. If someone called something inconclusive, the verifier never had something other than, okay, well, fine, yeah, all right, inconclusive. Because a lot of times it's so borderline that we came back, well, look, maybe if you had given it to me, maybe I might have called this, but if you're going inconclusive, I can see where you're coming from on that. Or maybe I might have excluded it, but, well, if you're going inconclusive, I can see why. So usually the distance between the verifier and initial person wasn't that far. And so because the verifier never added anything to it and never added a change, we realized that actually most of our time was spent on the inconclusives because they were little tiny pieces that were being searched all over, or they were incomplete knowns and you search what you could and then reach an inconclusive. So it seemed like in those cases you would have the process repeated with no change or impact. So although I agree that all the time and money and examiners, why not verify everything, including value decisions?
Right. So you don't verify value decisions?
We do not we don't verify value decisions.
Okay.
I'm smiling as I say that. Again, in an ideal world, I would be comfortable with that and say, yeah, okay. But on the other hand, we just felt that we weren't getting anything out of having a review around the inconclusives. It never changed the decision. Whereas when it came to exclusions and IDs, you might find sufficiency differences. So we just felt as a group we were spending a lot of time on that for very little effect. So that's why we decided that we weren't going to verify those. So now we just verify identifications and exclusions. And that's been working pretty well for the last 2 years for us. Okay. I'm not saying that we couldn't go there with resources, but we felt administratively that that was the right decision for us. So that's why.
Okay, so before I get into our agency, let me ask this. So you were saying that you didn't see a lot of change in the decision coming from the verifier.
Correct.
Do you get a lot of change with your IDs coming from the verifier?
Maybe 1 in 20 or 30 decisions, maybe. There might get kicked back and go, I don't know if this is enough for me for the exclusion. I see what you're thinking.
Well, not
but
for the exclusion.
No, I was starting with that one.
Okay.
And then going towards ID. I think it's more common for us to back off on the exclusion decision.
Right, that makes sense.
But we have a couple pretty conservative people in our lab. We've got a nice mix. And so, I'd say, that maybe 1 in, I'm just ballparking, maybe 1 in 30 decisions might get kicked back from our most conservative examiner saying, I don't know if there's enough here for me.
Okay.
1 in 30 identification decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
So we had a little kind of the opposite history through the verifications. And it was initially when we first went to making exclusion decisions, when AskCloud Lab first came through and declared that we would now make exclusion decisions, and we got on board with that, everyone decided right away, because we would rarely, on rare occasions, report exclusion decisions going all the way back forever. And those were always verified. So we decided, well, we're going to continue what we've always done.
Sure.
And now instead of being a rare case, it's going to be an everyday case. We'll exclude, but we'll still go through the verification process. And then after a year or so, our QA department came to us and said, we think you should also now verify inconclusives. So we said, okay. And since then, it's worked out fairly well for us. And first of all, philosophically, when we go through the ACE-V process, if that's our methodology, it's nice to be able to say that that is our methodology for everything. For no matter what decision we reach, we don't change the methodology or the general overall process, or whatever you want to call ACE-V. We don't change it depending on the conclusion that's reached.
Sure, and that's fair, and I think that's a purist view towards ACE-V. I can see that.
The second one is that for our lab, we've never detected an erroneous identification that we're aware of. Our lab has not made one, but we have missed. We have had inconclusive decisions that were later found to be identifications. They were just they were missed identifications. They were overlooked or somehow not seen. So, being that for lack of a better term, erroneous inconclusive is more likely than an erroneous ID, then this quality assurance step makes sense to be applied to this case as well. So what we did is instead of kind of backing away from the inconclusive or looking at all the time that it was taking us, we went a different direction and tried to find an approach that would not take as much time. And for us, that was looking at, okay, most of the time when we have an inconclusive decision, it's not because we're seeing anything in common and then it's just not enough for an ID, it's the other way. We're not seeing anything in common, but we're wondering if it's enough for an exclusion. So let's come up with some standard for exclusion so we know where to draw the line and all the examiners can be on about the same page. And then it can be really clear, okay, in these cases it's an exclusion, in these cases it's inconclusive, so we don't take as much time on that.
Is that something that you share in your workshop that you teach with Penny?
Yeah, it is. We go through in that workshop and go through the approach that works for us. We kind of explain our reasoning behind it and give examples of how that can be applied.
Well, maybe some of the examiners in our agency should take that workshop. Although I'm not in the latent print section anymore.
You're not making those decisions anymore.
I'm not making those. Not there anymore.
So, and then going through with the value statements, in reviewing those, it was even a different approach in how to effectively, well, we call it review. We don't call it verify value statements, but it's basically the same thing. In coming up with a description for everything that was not compared and saying that everything not compared is not a value for comparison. Everything not compared has value for exclusion only. And then instead of looking at every individual thing, the reviewer or verifier of value statements would then just have to look through and see if they could find anything that didn't fit that statement given to the remaining uncompared ridge detail. And that's worked again for us as an efficient way to still review everything, but not get bogged down in a more time-consuming way to do it.
Okay. Well, again, different approaches.
Yes.
And different administrative viewpoints. So, all right, cool. All right.
Now, I guess sure. I will follow up in amongst all this. We do have quite a bit of a backlog, but I would attribute that more to our lack of examiners, just pure numbers, than these approaches slowing us down. Mm-hmm. But take that as a little caveat as to everything that I just said.
Sure. Okay. All right. So we've now covered two of the three documents on SWGFAST for review. The third one was standard for consultation, and this was a new one.
Yes.
This one also, I was involved in this committee, and I remember initially it was going to be a standard for consultation and a standard for conflict resolution. I did not attend the last SWGFAST meeting, and it looks like they split it into two different standards.
Well, so there does seem to be some conflict resolution stuff towards the end, but was most of it taken out then?
Apparently, I was not there.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, this is actually seeing this, for me, some of this for the first time. And initially, I think we felt that there was some overlap between consultation and conflict resolution.
Yeah.
Often, consultation may be a part of conflict resolution. So some of the concepts are similar. Anyway, I mean, looking up a document, again, I like the approach. They try to define what a consultation is. A consultation is a significant interaction between examiners regarding one or more impressions in question. And then we've always been asked this before, well, what do you mean by significant? And we really tried to define that. And I think we got to the essence here, that when the examiner, the consulting examiner, hereafter a consultant, conducts an analysis or a comparison of the impressions. Specific examples are given in Section 4, and so there are some examples there that follow. And I like that because if you actually enter into an analysis or comparison of the latent print, then you are obviously being consulted. If you just look at something and go, yeah, that looks like a finger, or that looks like this, or I would write this down or write that down. But if you have to stop and grab a magnifier and you start analyzing features and you're looking at distortion in this, then you have entered into an analysis. And I think that's what we wanted to gather or try to capture, is that's what a significant interaction is. I am performing an analysis and or a comparison.
Okay. It makes sense as to the logic behind where to draw the line. And I guess, again, let me start off by saying that this isn't exactly how our agency defines a consultation, but it is a fairly clear, and I give SWGFAST credit for this part of it, a pretty clear distinction of when you've entered into a consultation. So it should be obvious when you're in a consultation if you've gone through and, like you said, put a glass on the latent, done an analysis, and then a comparison. Or a comparison. Yeah,
and then part of this came out, we were hearing that people were defining consultation very differently than we had ever intended. For example, we had heard about some agencies that they only considered a significant consultation when and I'm not kidding here, a significant number of examiners were involved. So if one examiner talked to another examiner, it wasn't significant. But if you talk to 3 examiners, well, now that's significant because that's a significant number of our examiners. That was never SWGFAST's intention. So we really felt we need to be much more specific about. It's funny when you throw something out there that seems pretty clear. Everyone's got a different interpretation, and you never can predict how an agency will interpret, that. And I don't think that was just their natural interpretation of what they thought we meant. That was not what we meant.
Right. No, our agency has generally interpreted a significant interaction as to one that is needed for or influences the decision of the original examiner. Yeah. And that's a little more kind of a squishy line, but it's worked for us into kind of what we understand that to mean.
Yeah, and that was actually pretty close to our original thought, was if it had some influence on the final decision. But then we realized we could just simplify it. If they are engaged in an analysis or a comparison, then clearly they're involved in some way, and that should be documented.
Now, one thing that Penny and I have been talking about in some of our classes is the importance of discussion in a latent print unit, and I don't understand. I'm not sure if this was coming from us or if this was already kind of in the original version of this document.
No, it was in the original version.
But I see that is specified in here. Is that there are specific cases laid out of when you're in a consultation and when you're in something that does not need to be documented, a discussion.
Right, and in fact that's the word, a discussion or some other communication. Right. So there's we make a distinction between just a discussion versus a consultation. Hey, what do you do for this, or what would you do? Would you process this? I've got this surface. Would you apply super glue on this one, or would you do? That's not a consultation. That's a discussion to us. That's just trying to get some basic knowledge from someone else about what they might do, as opposed to engaging in an analysis or a comparison.
Questions like which way is up? Is this a palm?
Right.
These kind of basic level questions. And we felt that was really important to maintain that, because even no matter what's written in the document, consultations tend to have this negative connotation of people in general don't want to go up to the level of a consultation, or are somehow can be discouraged away from engaging in their coworkers when it has to be documented up to a certain level.
Yeah, and that was one of our fears, but when you look at Section 5, what do you have to document? You have to write your initials, the date, which latent you're talking about, and then sort of the nature of the discussion. So the first three things take less than a second to write down, and then you basically have to say consulted on suitability.
Right.
We agree it's suitable.
Right.
Or we consulted on sufficiency. Or we consulted on distortion. I mean, what you have to document takes under 30 seconds to document, and
Sure.
having documented a number of these. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we were worried that examiners would stop talking to other examiners because now they have to write it down.
Right.
But what they're writing down is so minimal. But as in fact, we talked about this today in class. My view, and I think other people on SWGFAST, was once you do write something down, and once you're held accountable for what you write down, you're not so cavalier about the consultation. And we would see this in anecdotal cases where someone would say, hey, what do you think about this? And someone would just stop and look for a few seconds, go, oh yeah, sure, I'd call that. And there's this cavalier nature, but the minute they go, okay, well now write that down that you would call that.
Right.
Well, maybe I should look at that for a few more minutes. Why don't you give it to me? I'll print it out and let me look at my desk.
Got it.
That slows people down, makes them think cautiously about what they actually would or wouldn't do, and then you document it. And I think that's important. Documenting it holds people accountable.
And then one of the research projects that you've worked on kind of demonstrates the importance of examiners discussing, talking about things. When you had the different groups of people making decisions, the groups that saw either the conclusion of another examiner or the markup of points from another examiner came to more accurate conclusions overall.
And more consistent.
More consistent than just an examiner given something with no additional information.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is good evidence not only in our community but the medical community and other resources where you see that experts talking, and hot tubbing is another phrase where you get even experts at different viewpoints sitting down together, although hot tubbing would be much better. That would be kind of a cool thing to do, but hot tubbing is the phrase.
Next conference. Where's the next conference at? It's in Minnesota, right?
It's in Minneapolis.
Okay.
We'll do some hot tubbing there. I mean, I think when you get experts to sit down and discuss these things, I think it's a beneficial thing, and you end up with a better product in the end.
I agree. And I mean, there is that worry of bias, and at some level, consultation is definitely significant enough that it needs to be documented into the case record. But you think the key thing is to find a way to do that, to document the significant interactions without limiting the examiners talking to each other. One thing that our agency is going to have to take a look at is another thing that we call a discussion that we just may need to redefine. And what it is it's basically an extra verification, giving the latent and the known to someone who's not the verifier to take a look at in some cases. We generally call this a discussion unless they come back with a different answer from the original examiner. Mm-hmm. So say the original examiner, they've written everything out, they've got their conclusion, that's all set, and then they think, hey, before I give this to the verifier, just come take a look at this one. And if that extra person comes and takes a look at it, then without knowing what the original person said, yeah, I'll call that, which matches up with the original examiners, they'll just say, all right, great, and send it off to the verifier. If they say, man, I don't know, that's, I mean, I can see what you're seeing, but I'd go inconclusive, then they've entered into a consultation, and that gets documented. So we may just have to kind of redefine what that means, but we find that a valuable interaction for our examiners to have. We don't want to discourage that. I don't know. We'll just have to kind of take a look at that at our agency.
Right. Yeah. Okay. No, fair enough. All right. So that was the SWGFAST updates. I think we covered that. And as I said at the top of the hour, top of the show, that we had a second thing to discuss that had come out, and I thought I would cover this a little bit. Now, admittedly, I haven't spent as much time on this as I should, but I'll tell you a little bit about this. It's about the future of SWGFAST. So NIST has sent out several documents and requests for information and opinions from the community, and basically what they're doing, NIST. Well, all right. First of all, a little history. The SWGs right now, or up until now have been funded by NIJ. All the money for the SWGs have been through the NIJ.
National Institute of Justice.
Thank you. Yeah, National Institute of Justice. And that money, while earmarked by NIJ, has been distributed through the FBI. So the FBI basically planned and hosted these conferences, and as one of their things that they always have to have an FBI member on the SWG. So, I mean, they plan it, and that this is how they get involved. And they've always had a large presence in the SWGs, but not to say that they've been able in more recent times to influence how the SWGs, go. I mean, especially SWGFAST is a great mix of all these practitioners and private industry and academics and researchers. It's a really nice mix, and a nice international grouping, too. So, very recently, there has been this question about, is this model working for the SWGs? Because a lot of the SWGs had each SWG seemed very different from the other SWG. There's a lot of variability. So the idea was to bring all the SWGs under one roof and to sort of standardize the SWGs. And now it looks like what they're doing is going to be bringing them under NIST, and I assume whatever money was going to NIJ will be going towards NIST, which is a money power grab, and we can pontificate what that might mean in Washington. But it looks like the SWGs are finding a home under NIST, which it makes sense. I mean, it's a natural place to go. This is a body that is used to dealing with standards and technology. So, okay, so let's say they go to NIST, but now they're looking at changing a few things. For example, not calling them scientific working groups anymore. They're talking about calling them GGs, guidance groups, because they feel that some of the SWGs may not be scientific, quote unquote, enough. And I've got some views on this, and again, I might be a little more cynical of how things work in Washington, but anyway, the point is, they're asking for, and if anyone wants the website, they can contact me. They're asking for comments, and so it's open for another. When this comes out, it'll be open for about a month or so. Yeah. November 12th is the cutoff date, but who knows with the government shutdown, maybe it'll be extended longer. But here's a quick summary. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, invites interested parties to provide their perspective on the appropriate model for NIST administration and support of discipline-specific, here we go, guidance groups, GGs, to be established pursuant to the Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, between the Department of Justice, how many acronyms is that? It's like 6 acronyms in the first sentence.
Exactly.
And between DOJ and NIST. So it's supposed to be a partnership between NIST and DOJ. NIST seeks to identify and understand approaches for the structure of effective and sustainable GGs, guidance groups. This notice does not solicit comments or advice on the policies that should be addressed. So they're not looking for the day-to-day. They're basically saying, how should we do this? How should we govern these and run these under one umbrella? So I have an opinion, and I will write them. My opinion, having been on both a SWG and also on some of these larger committees, like the Human Factors Group, which encompassed lots of shareholders, and that's really what this is talking about, trying to involve the shareholders. Right. When you look at the shareholders, you're talking about the critics, Simon Cole, Jennifer Mnuchin, Ralph Haber, individuals who have written quite a bit. When we look at the Human Factors Committee, we had a number of quote-unquote critics on there. Yeah. We also had some people who had a biology background, DNA background. We had practitioners. We had human factors people. We had E.T.L. Dror with a psychological bias perspective. Dave Charlton, who's a practitioner and a researcher. We had academics. We had a number of people. And while I'm very proud of the Human Factors document, there were so many different interests there that it was very painful to get that document out. And it took a long time to get that document out with lots of revision and very painful discussions.
And my own personal view of that Human Factors document is most of it is really good and has some absolutely great recommendations for our discipline, but there's a lot that's not good. And
it's a camel, right?
Yes.
It's a horse designed by a committee, a camel. That's the phrase that's been used before. What is a camel? It's a horse designed by a committee of people.
And especially with a lot of the research that's come out on our discipline that have been helpful in leading us in how to kind of work in this modern times in our discipline. There's a lot of stuff in that human factors group that was based on less than completely robust research that, again, if we had to be held to exactly everything that's written in that human factors group, it would cripple us as a discipline.
Yeah, I know. I think I know what sections you might be referring to, and maybe we can talk about it in another show.
Yeah.
But point being, I don't know that that's going to be the most effective approach for the. I want to say SWGs because that's what they should be, but the very fact that they want to call them guidance groups already puts me on edge. There's already that, oh no, we can't call them scientific working groups.
Right.
Well, then why not? Get scientists on these groups and call them scientific working groups. Why dick around here?
Right.
I mean, why just call them guidance groups? Get a scientific approach and keep them as SWGs.
And even guidance seems so wishy-washy. I mean, I know SWGFAST in the past had been more recommendations and have now moved to more of a standards approach. Guidance seems
I know.
Just somewhere else out there that's not even quite recommendation or standards, especially coming from NIST.
Yeah, that
seems like it would be some sort of better term than just guidance.
Yeah. So step one, get rid of that damn name.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's a common theme on this show. Get rid of that damn title. All right. So the second thing is what I would, if I'm going to approach this, I would have kind of what we have now, the group of vested interests, the practitioners predominantly with some academics and good writers at the practitioner level doing the day-to-day standards, that these are standards that can be followed on a day-to-day basis. Those should be the people writing the standards. And
if even further than from what SWGFAST is or has been, since it's kind of not something right now, is, I would say, even more important to ensure a certain number of people still actually doing the work. I think even SWGFAST with...
No drug chemist supervisors at this point?
Well, you still do some work.
Okay, some work.
But, I mean, I do see the value of these other interested parties. But even people that are practitioners, if they haven't been a practitioner for 10 years or so, the world now is different than it was then.
Yeah,
and
that's a good point.
They may not fully understand
the environment.
All the environment. But even further, the decisions that they're making on this committee, they then don't have to follow and then don't understand the unintended consequences. Yeah, and if it's one thing that SWGFAST can produce, it's unintended consequences.
Well, I think that's a really fair point, that, having a number of people who live and die by the very sword that they forge, I think is important. Okay, so I'm with you on that. So that's who should be writing the standards. Then I don't have a problem if it goes to an external review with these other stakeholders for comment, so that you get some of the critics, you get the law professors, you get whoever else you feel that needs to be in on this, a judge or whatever, or some legal fine, okay. And they can make comments and they can suggest maybe you should have done this or think about this or recognize that this law would require this. That's great. Okay, fine. Get those other stakeholders involved. And then that can go back to them to consider. And then it should go out a third time to a broader community, again, the practitioners, and open to the general public for comment.
Right.
So I like this kind of tiered approach where you've got, like you said, the practitioners and those who are really involved at that level, then bring in the other people, the more human factors like committee as reviewers, and then again to a broader, now it goes out to everybody for comment. That would be the model that I would suggest after they change that damn title.
Oh, well, we'll have to maybe provide them with a better acronym.
I've got one. Scientific Working Group.
Maybe there's some sort of political room kind of thing of where they don't want to use the name.
I don't care.
Okay. Because this is our opportunity to come up with,
yell at them. This is our opportunity to yell at them.
We just find some word that we like and then just make up the acronym to fit the rest of it. It just sounds cool.
Okay, all right. Well, we can get rid of SWGFAST. I've never liked the fast part.
Okay.
All right, we can get something more like SWGPrint.
Oh, okay.
Something like that. We can work on that.
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
Well, I think that kind of covers everything. Everything that we can talk about here in this one episode. Keep coming back every week for more episodes of the Double Loop Podcast. Look for us every Tuesday morning on SoundCloud, on iTunes, and on Stitcher.
Download the app.
Download the SoundCloud app to your phone if you already haven't done that, if that's the way you can get to us. Or look for us, just do a search on iTunes. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye everybody.
Bye.
Have a good week.
Hey everybody, looking to use up some of your end of the year training dollars that you might have left over? Well, if you're interested, I am teaching advanced ACE-V applications for fingerprint examiners in 2 different locations. The first one is December 9th through December 13th, 2013 in Decatur, Georgia, and the other is January 13th through January 17th, 2014 in Thornton, Colorado, just outside of Denver. If you're interested in either of these classes, go to Ron Smith and Associates, and near their training page, you can register for these classes. Hope to see you there in either Georgia or Colorado, and come on and we'll have a good time. It's a good class. We'll talk about lots of advanced topics, and certainly ACE-V will be the focus. So hope to see you there.